Jenna Harper. I may be your teacher, or you may have Amy Defoe. Either way, we both teach the same stuff, so this should be pretty relevant to all of you across the board. So today's agenda, just so you kind of know what we're doing, the first 15 minutes or so, I'm going to talk about the assignment 9.3.1 in Biology Semester 1. And then I'm going to spend about 15 minutes with question and answer. It's open time for you guys to ask me questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be over what we talked about, but if it is, I would love to talk about it with you. Then we're going to spend about 15 minutes talking about study skills and how you can relate real life application into that. And then 15 minutes of question and answer time, round 2, again, for any questions that you may still have after that. So that's what we're going to get started with. If you have any questions when we go through, feel free to send a chat or just take your microphone and just ask me the question, and I would love to answer it. Okay, so this actual assignment, 9.3.1 on Biology Semester 1 says, after learning about some examples of impacts to ecosystems, what role do you feel humans play in this, if any? And what should be done about this to help limit the impact? So it's kind of a two-part question. Number one, what role do you think humans play, if at all? And then what should we do to help limit this impact that humans have in our environment? So I'm going to go through some different things that humans do in our environment, and then I'll show you some examples, and at the end I'm going to show you a little video, and hopefully it should help you with this topic. So when we talk about humans and the environment, first of all, we got to understand some vocab before we go into it. So what is conservation? And what I say is conservation is the wise use of natural resources. So using what we have, but let's recycle, reducing resource use, only using, what you need to use. It's having a conservative mindset with the environment and our natural resources. And then sustainable development is using enough resources to meet your needs without destroying or depleting resources for future generations. I teach in a brick and mortar school in Memphis, Tennessee, and I always make my students do a ecological footprint, and they basically have to go through this big questionnaire, and it tells them if everybody in the world lived like you, we would need this many Earths to support. And they're always just like blown away, because usually when we go through and they do all their travel or their houses and everything adds up, it's like 6 or 7 Earths that we would need to sustain life if everyone lived like them. So it's just interesting to reflect on your use of the world and what we can do to help make sure our Earth is around for future generations. I always tell my students for their great-great-great-grandchildren, and they're like, I will never meet them anyway, but it's good to save the Earth. So one of the things that humans do, it's called desertification, and that's when you have productive, fertile land that now is going to be changed into a desert because we have misuse of land and dry ecosystems through either overplanting or overgrazing. And overgrazing is like if you have cattle or horses or any type of land, any type of animal you would see on a ranch or farm, and you let them in an area for too long, and then they eat too much of the producers out of the environment, and then that land can't recover. And then same with overplanting in dry ecosystems, where I grew up in Eastern Washington, they have to crop rotate, which is really great that they do that, but it still sometimes can't even keep up. As compared to where I live now, we have enough rain for everybody, but still we do overplant. And so there are negative effects of that. So problem, when we have desertification, when we turn this productive, fertile land into desert, there's fewer species that can live there. There's lack of nutrients and possible erosion. So we have to make sure that we do not let our productive fertile lands dry out and go into desert land, because more species is going to be a better environment. Lack of nutrients is never good for an environment. So positive effects, we always want to talk about something positive. So this can be reversed. You can, soil can be replenished. I always say the earth is like a very awesome place because we can damage so much of it and it is able to come back. So we can replenish the soil, but there's a lot of conservation efforts that have to go into fixing these type of things. So here's just a little image I have of like a desert land. You can see where we have all these producers, which are just plants growing, but they used to be lush. If you look over in this back left corner, you can see how it used to be really, you know, fruitful, and we used to have tons of producers going on. And then you can look up here in the front of the image and you can see how the land is cracked and dried and there's nothing growing. So that was a once fertile land, now not so fertile at all. All right, so deforestation, you probably have heard of deforestation. I know it's earlier in the course, you learn about it a little bit, but this is humans clearing forests for different things. People always think that people just cut down trees, you know, because we're so used to people talking about this, but people cut down trees because they build houses, or, you know, they're going to make furniture or different things like that, that we do need wood from the trees. But deforestation is a super important thing to talk about because forests have this moderate temperature. They help create a balance between our carbon and oxygen cycle. So we need enough carbon dioxide and oxygen, and our forests help moderate that in our environment. So when we cut down all the trees, we have some issues. So our negative effects of this are destruction of habitats. Yes, humans may be cutting down the forest, so they have new area to live, but we are destructing the habitat of all wildlife. So you think about this, I live, when you go out to the suburbs of where I live, they're making all these new housing communities and people are like, oh, it's great for the economy. Yes, it is. But we think about, wow, the deer used to live right there and now they no longer have a place to live. And then we have problems with, you know, deer crossing in the roads because they're used to just living out there, and then people get in car wrecks and there's all sorts of issues. Decreasing soil fertility. So when you take out trees and producers, that's going to decrease the soil fertility, which just basically means that the soil won't be as good for growing. It's just not going to be as good as it used to be. And then the most important thing, I think all these are important, but less oxygen. So we know that producers, plants, trees, all those things, they give oxygen through a process called photosynthesis. So they're so important to our environment because they are going to release this oxygen. And what do we take in? Is we take in the oxygen. And then when we breathe out the carbon dioxide, the trees and plants use that to then go through photosynthesis again and make oxygen. So it's one big cycle. So when you take away all these trees, we have serious issues with our carbon oxygen cycle. Positive effects, again, we can reverse this. So we can plant trees, plant seedlings, all different stuff for that. Obviously, the positives for humans are, you know, we use wood for construction, furniture, paper. I know if you've been in a school, you know how much paper we use. They're trying to go away from that. But there are positive things that we don't always think about that we for sure can take. You know, everyone wants to live in a house, and so we need wood for that. So here's an example of a picture of deforestation. You can see where the forest is still intact towards the back of the picture, but you can see how it's all being cut down here. Looks like we have some burning happening here as well. They'll do that to kind of make sure everything is gone before they kind of level it off. So it's just, destructive. Imagine if you can put yourself in a thought that if you were a deer or a squirrel and you lived right here, now I'm going to have to go compete for resources in a different area because my home is now destroyed. It's crazy to think about it. We don't always think about all of the organisms in the world, but it is quite devastating for them. Okay, overfishing. I don't personally like to eat fish, but a lot of people do. And that's like the big thing is fish farms or oceans. You see the big fishing boats. I don't know, my kids love Finding Nemo. So you see like the fishermen, they come in and they just get a net and they have so much fish they're taking out of the ocean. So there are laws that are put in place to limit the number of fish that can be caught because it is devastating to take that many fish out. I read reports probably like 5-10 years ago, they were saying that if things didn't change, like by the year 2050, that, all of fish population could go extinct. And so they started really putting more laws on this because it's a serious problem. So negative effects. If you don't like seafood, it's really not a problem because you don't eat fish anyway, but it is a big problem because if you take a certain type of fish out of the environment, think about what ate that fish or what did that fish eat. So everything is connected. If you take out all that fish and something else ate that fish, that something else now no longer has something to eat. And then vice versa, if that fish, whatever it ate, it's no longer eating that. So that organism is going to start growing in population because there's nothing eating it anymore. This can also lead to extinction of species. If I take out too many of one type of fish, they may not be able to recover from this devastation. So also, again, positive effects. We always try and look at the glass half full. It provides an abundant amount of food for humans. But we all know that we, as humans, sometimes are a little bit greedy and we may eat more than we need to. So not always the best thing. Here's a picture of just something I found off of Google of a fishing boat out on the ocean. You can just see the massive amounts of fish they're catching. So obviously it is a problem, but there's good laws being put into place that are going to protect the fishing wildlife. Pollution. So humans, this is a big one. Pollution is released through the burning of fossil fuels and power plants, factories, and vehicles. If you don't even think about it, but like this morning, I drove to the gym, I came back, we got to run errands this afternoon. And just my vehicle alone, I'm letting off tons of emissions into our environment that we don't even think about. Power plants that, the big factories that make different things. We have a factory here that makes windows and doors. And you drive by it and you can just see the pollution just flowing into the air. Burning of fossil fuels. So I don't know, thinking about just today, it's 90 something degrees in Tennessee. So the air conditioning is blasting. So that takes up energy and we're releasing CCCs into the environment. So all of these things that we do are going to burn fossil fuels and release that pollution into the environment. So why is this important? Why does it matter? When we release these fossil fuels and we burn fossil fuels, what happens is we are going to increase the amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And some people get really freaked out by this, but carbon dioxide is necessary, right? What do we breathe out? Carbon dioxide. And plants need that carbon dioxide. The problem is when we get I always say too much of a good thing is never a good thing, because too much carbon dioxide is what is going to cause our temperatures to rise. And that is when we have a rise in temperature, which causes global warming. So carbon dioxide is good. We need it to keep our environment at a certain temperature. Without it, we would freeze out. So we need it. But when we have too much of a good thing, it's never a good thing. And we have warming of the globe. So how does this affect us? Causing glaciers to melt and eventually polar ice caps. So I have this picture that I use. I think it might be on the next slide. Yep, I'll go back to it. But polar bears, you know, they live out on the polar ice caps. And when they start melting, they don't have a place to stay anymore. And then we think about if all these ice are melting, what's going to happen to our sea level? It's going to rise. And so you think about your favorite vacation spot on the coast somewhere. You know, if we keep having melting of these polar ice caps, what's going to happen to our water levels? They're going to rise. So we talk about you better live in like the middle of the country if we keep up our bad ways, because we could have some serious issues. So like I said here, sea levels will rise and coastal cities may be found underwater. Hopefully we can do something about it before all this happens, because we already know we have an overpopulation area or problem. And if you think about stacking all these people that live on the coastal cities into the middle, it's going to be crazy. It would be just a whole different world. So here's some pictures of right here on the left picture, we have pollution from a power plant. I'm sure you all have seen this when you drive along the side of the road. When I was in college, I lived by a dog food plant, and you would drive by and you would see just all the emission going into there. And also it was about the worst smell I've ever smelled in my life. So it's just like, you can tell something's not normal about it. And then over here we have poor polar bear man that's holding on for his home, for his dear life. Yeah, it's very sad to see an organism of any type, you know, losing its home. So, all right, another one that we don't really talk about enough, and I might be going over my 15 minutes here, but we don't have many people on, so I might just continue here. Pollution, so acid rain. When we burn coal, I know people lately are talking about burning clean coal. I'm not quite sure what clean coal is, because it releases nitrates and sulfates into the atmosphere. And we know with the water cycle that we've learned about, I don't know if all of you have dived into earth science yet in your course load, but when you release these nitrates and sulfates up into the atmosphere, they mix with the water vapor and condensation, and then we produce acid rain. So acid rain can kill, it comes down and it can kill or injure trees, plants, fish, and insects. When I tell my students this in the brick and mortar school, they're like, oh, it comes down and like burns your skin off like acid. Like, I'm like, no, we don't have that low of a pH. It's acidic enough to kill trees, plants, fish, and insects at a certain extent, but it's not going to like come down and burn your skin off. It's not that acidic. It's not like battery acid or anything, but the more we release these nitrates and sulfates into the atmosphere, the bigger problems we have. So it could get to a point where we have serious issues, but it's not like you need to keep out of the rain because you're going to die. CFCs, I don't know, any of you guys have ever used aerosol cans, like hairspray, or I have a problem using a lot of dry shampoo because I'm lazy. So anything like Febreze sprays or anything like that, CFCs are going to be released, and what happens when they put holes into the ozone layer. So if you look down here at my picture here, this is our ozone layer, and what it does is it is going to block UV radiation from the sun. So this is like our protection zone right here. And when we release these CFCs, we put holes into this, and so the sun just, you know, radiates through. And I don't know about any of you, but I have pretty fair skin. So when the UV radiation, I always look at the UV index before I go outside. So if it's like a 10, that means like the UV is just coming down, unless you're going to wear like some very heavy sunscreen, but eventually that'll wear off too. So it's important that we have this ozone layer because it's our protection from the sun. Water pollution, runoff area carries oil, gasoline, pesticides, fertilizers, sediment, which pollutes our clean water supply. Industrial waste and human sewage also pollute our fresh water. And we must not use any more water than is necessary to protect the supply for future generations. I know we live in a country where we don't necessarily think about how much water we're using because it's just continually coming out of the faucet or continually coming out of the hose. And so we don't have to think about that, but it's not like that everywhere. And we take these things for granted. And I live in where, you know, everyone fertilizes their lawn and you just think, oh, I want green grass, but we're thinking about all the extra nitrogen we're adding to the atmosphere. Well, what happens when we have this downpour of a rain, which we have all the time? You know, that nitrogen is going to go off of my yard and then it's going to slide down into lakes, and that's going to affect the fish. Too much nitrogen causes algae problems. So it's just something to think about. Okay, now I'm going to put this video up for you guys.
Stitch Fix is an online personal styling service. You fill out an online profile, you tell them your size, what your budget is.
Let's skip this ad. All right, so I'm going to play this and you can just watch. It's 4 minutes. Then we can discuss after. Okay. So I hope that you um, enjoyed that. So now we're into our question and answer part of the live session. So I just wanted to ask you, after seeing that video and just kind of self-reflecting on the earth and what we do to it, identify maybe one activity, overfishing, deforestation, or desertification, that caused the situation. So explain how you knew which activity was being described. You know, we don't even have to do that. You can just talk about if you've seen something like this and what you think happened, or one that, you know, is close to you that you think is devastating to the environment. So, or you can ask me any questions you have about anything in the biology class itself. So does anybody have anything they'd like to input?
Yeah, so the overfishing one kind of spoke to me a lot. My husband's from Florida and he loves fishing, but he's also all about sustainability and like catch and release. And I don't really know how I feel about it. I'd rather just leave them alone in general. But I know that that's something that he talks about quite a bit and just like what we can do. But the question I had is, for this discussion post, it's like write about what we can do to minimize the impact. And now thinking about like all these different activities that you talked about, they all seem so large scale. Like, how can I stop the rainforest from being cut down? Like, can we talk about some of that a little bit?
Yeah, so that's great. So I always think about what can I do? And that's a lot of people's thoughts are, well, what can I do about that? Like you said, I can't stop the rainforest from being, knocked down, but you can start with literally the smallest of things. Cutting off the water when you brush your teeth. I always tell people that's the first thing that I do. Cutting down on your shower time. Um, when you water your grass, don't water it in the middle of the daytime. You do it, um, at a time that's the water's not going to evaporate all out into the atmosphere. So just taking like small steps like that, or watching what you have your thermostat on. Maybe if I'm going to be gone all day, I turn it up a little bit. And so my air conditioning isn't working so hard throughout the day. Maybe washing clothes less times a week. Those are just some small examples that I always like to tell people are a great thing to start with. And then you can, you can go all the way up to, start recycling all of your plastics and cardboard, all that stuff. You can start recycling all that. I know a lot of big cities have recycling pickups. So, and then you can just take it further and further and further. And sometimes when you get passionate about something, or you start with something small, it becomes bigger and it becomes kind of a way of life. And sometimes, it's not for everyone, but you can always do your part, which is, cutting down on the little things.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to think about. I know for me, like I had a roommate who didn't even know what recycling was. So like I try to do my part and I had to like train her. But also when we start talking on this, like the scale of the planet and significance of just one person,
Right.
how much did we get that to add up?
Right. Yeah. I feel like sometimes it's so easy in our world to just kind of take yourself away from reality and not really think about the effect that we all have. But, if we all do something small, we can make a big difference.
I like that.
And I say too, I'm like the worst because I'm like, oh, I should have recycled that. Oh, okay. I'm sitting here talking about we need to do this. So we all make mistakes and sometimes we get off track, but
You
going
learn
back.
from it, right?
Oh, just one second. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so did you have any other questions that you would like to ask anybody in the chat?
Um,
Anybody in the chat? Or should I just move on and talk about real life application?
I'm ready to move on if nobody else has questions.
Okay. All right. So the next part of our agenda was to talk about real life application or any type of study skills that we can use. So I felt like it was relevant to this topic because all of this is real life application. So what do you see in your natural world that can help you think about this type of stuff? Literally, if you just walk outside, you can think about all the things you can do in this specific example to help the environment. And so I just think applying real life concepts, experiences, and things like that, like Rachel said, her husband's fishing, you know, she applied that when she was thinking about how to conserve. She was thinking about, oh, my husband likes to fish, but he's all into conservation too. So, you know, we have hobbies that we can catch and release and, you know, follow the laws and still have a good time doing it. There's a lot of people that hunt, you know, but they don't take more than what they need and they use it to actually cook and bring home meals. So we're just getting out in your natural world and exploring phenomena in the natural world is such an important part of science because you can learn so much from just literally getting outside and just looking around. Thinking about water conservation, thinking about, okay, how much water did I use today? Well, I can think about, wow, okay, this is how long I took a shower for. And when I brushed my teeth, I wasn't paying attention to that. And so does anybody have any question about real life application?
How do I get into the mind frame to do this more? Like, that's kind of probably not the best way to word it, but like, you know, people are able just to kind of see things around them. And how do I just start making those connections?
Right. So that is like the most difficult thing. It's kind of like some people, I feel like the way they were raised, maybe like I don't think I was necessarily raised this way to think about all these things because my parents aren't like super granola, but somehow like me and one of my other brothers kind of are. So I don't know. It's just like you start thinking about, okay, how am I affecting the environment? And so maybe just start small, you know, self-reflection, like, you know, 3 minutes one day. Think about, okay, how long of a shower did I take? Or when I went outside, man, I saw that all those trees just got chopped down. Things like that. And then you can start just small and then hopefully it changes into more of a way of life. You just, you know, think about conservation and taking care of the world.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. It's something that I don't think about all the time, and sometimes I feel guilty.
I say it all the time. I'm like, I feel like a hypocrite and I feel guilty like all the time because I talk about this stuff and then, you know, but that's the thing. You just take it one day at a time and start thinking about outside. I mean, if you just like look into the sky, you can think anything science. Or if you sit down on your couch and take a breath, I mean, everything you think about that has to do with the world or your life or any other human life or any other organism life is all science related. So I'm like, isn't it cool that you know that you're breathing out carbon dioxide? And
Yeah, be able to explain that to everybody.
like, go home and tell your parents, like, I breathed out so much carbon dioxide today.
Yeah.
They look at you like you're crazy. But anyway, so is there any other questions on anything in biology semester 1 or even semester 2 that you're having trouble with? You know, if you don't have them right now and you watch this video later, I know there's not a lot of people on. Please feel free to email me or chat message me. I would love to help you. And even if you have like kind of a rebuttal, because I know sometimes people think that humans don't have an impact. So sometimes they don't think that. So we can always have that conversation too. It's always good to have, academic conversations and have different sides. So, all right. So I think that we are done for today. I really enjoyed getting to share some information with you guys. Again, if you need any help, please reach out. And I am Jenna Harper. I teach biology and earth science if you're trying to find me. And yeah, thanks so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
Okay, bye.